In Chapter 5, we're going to talk about how to form a business. For all you entrepreneurs out there, this is going to be a pretty interesting chapter to really pay attention to and may just make you decide whether or not you're going to form your own business in the future, because there's a lot of information to take in and understand, as well as legal items that you will need to take into consideration. There are 6 learning objectives for this chapter. The first one is comparing the advantages and disadvantages of sole proprietorships. 2, describing the difference between general and limited partners and compare the advantages and disadvantages of partnerships. Compare the advantages and disadvantages of corporations and summarize the differences between C corporations, S corporations, and limited liability companies. Number 4, define and give examples of 3 types of corporate mergers and explain the role of leveraged buyouts and taking a firm private. 5, outline the disadvantages and advantages of franchises and discuss the opportunities for diversity in franchising and challenges of global franchising. And finally, explain the role of cooperatives. This slide gives a description of a great example of an entrepreneur and founder of Drybar. Her name is Alli Webb. She was a trained hairstylist in a salon in New York City. She launched a mobile blowout business in LA and then opened her first shop. Customers were really fascinated and attracted to getting blowouts at an affordable price, and that the salons looked like bars, so it made it fun. She and her partners raised money and received investments from a private equity firm and was able to offer franchising opportunities for other like-minded hairstylists in the area. All right, let's get this chapter started with a trivia question. So let's name that company. When 2 giant media companies merged in 2019, they became an even bigger, greater entertainment colossus. The company is now stronger in a position to compete with Netflix. In addition to introducing a new streaming service, this company also owns 60% of Hulu. Can you name those companies, those 2 giant media companies? If you name Disney and 21st Century Fox, you are correct. Let's talk about the basic forms of ownership. There's the sole proprietorship, which is a business that's owned by one person. Partnerships, it's also a legal form of business that has 2 or more owners. And then there's a corporation, a legal entity with the authority to act and have liability that's separate from owners. So it's important to keep in mind that 400,000 businesses are started each year, and they could be in the form of any one of these major types of ownership. This slide shows the different forms of ownership and how many there are as a percentage of businesses, and then of course total receipts. There's almost 5 million corporations in the United States, and they make up only 20% of all businesses, but they earn 81% of the total receipts. But then let's talk about sole proprietorships. They are the most common form, and they represent 72% of businesses, but they only earn about 6% of the receipts. And then again, you have the partnerships that represent 8% of businesses, but then they have a higher percentage of receipts, and probably just because when you have partners, you have more money to go into the business, at least you would think, which would allow for greater investment and more return on your investment. As we discussed in the last slide, sole proprietorships account for the largest number of businesses in the U.S. at 72%. This slide gives you a glimpse of what makes sole proprietorships advantageous. Ease of starting and ending your own business. In order to start a sole proprietorship, you simply just have to announce that you're going to be starting your business. You have to have the equipment, obviously, and the expertise to run the business, and you're off to a great start. Another advantage is being your own boss. Sometimes for people, working for others just isn't as exciting as working for yourself. Uh, at least with being your own boss, you're making your own mistakes, but you're also learning from them and profiting from them. Pride of ownership. People who own and manage their own businesses are proud of their work, which they rightfully should be. You deserve the credit for taking the risks and providing the goods and services to your customers. Leaving a legacy. Many people want to leave something to their family to let their name live on, and having your own business is one way of doing that. Retention of company profits. As a sole proprietorship, you retain all profits earned, and then you also benefit from the increasing value of your business. There's no special taxes. All the profits of the sole proprietorship are taxed as the personal income of the owner. The owner pays the normal income tax on that money. But please keep in mind, owners do have to pay self-employment tax for Social Security and Medicare, and you also have to pay estimated quarterly payments to the government for your portion of income taxes. And if you don't do that, you will suffer penalties. The main advantage of sole proprietorships is the ease by which they can be started. This slide gives you the reasons why this form of ownership only accounts for a small percentage of overall total revenue at 7% among other types of businesses. One of the biggest disadvantages of a sole proprietorship is unlimited liability, or having your personal assets at risk. The time commitment. You're basically on call 24 hours, 7 days per week, 365 days per year. Other things are limited financial resources. Funds available to businesses are limited to what the owner can gather. There are serious limits to how much money one person can raise. Partnerships and corporations have that greater probability of obtaining financial backing needed to start and equip a business and make it grow. Next is management difficulties. All businesses need management. Someone must keep inventory, accounting, tax records, etc. Many people that are skilled at a particular business may not necessarily be skilled at keeping records. Sole proprietorships often find it difficult to attract qualified employees, mainly just because they can't compete with bigger businesses to provide the salary and benefits offered. Overwhelming time commitment. As I mentioned, you're basically working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. Though the sole proprietorships say they set their own hours, it's really hard to do that and manage, train, and have time for anything else in your life. So when thinking about a sole proprietorship, you must consider this problem as well. There's few fringe benefits. If you are your own boss, you lose fringe benefits that often comes with working at a larger company. You have no health insurance paid, no paid disability, no pension, no sick leave, and no vacation pay. Limited growth. Expansion is often slow since a sole proprietorship relies on its owner for most of its creativity, business know-how, and funding. A limited lifespan. If the sole proprietor dies, is incapacitated, or retires, the business no longer exists. Talk with a few sole proprietors to find out what life is really like running a business on your own before investing your own personal time and financial resources. As we discussed, opening a sole proprietor-owned business takes a lot of time commitment. If you were to open a business, not only would you have to run the business, you would also have to be aware of areas of growing your business, competing with other like businesses, and looking for reliable employees, etc. If you decide to pursue your own business, think about how you would take a vacation and what you would need in order to sustain your business while you're away. Many of you are not aware of the effort it takes to run a small business. This slide shows us the amount of hours per week some owners spend in their businesses. More than half of business owners work more than 40 hours a week. Are the demands of a small business owner what you would expect? Remember, as a small business, the owner is solely responsible whether or not they succeed or are able to earn a profit to support themselves and their families. Let's review. The primary advantages of sole proprietors are ease of starting and ending the business, being your own boss, pride of ownership, and leaving a legacy, retention of company profits, and no special taxes. The disadvantages include unlimited liability, limited financial resources, management difficulties, overwhelming time commitment, few fringe benefits, limited growth, and limited lifespan. With unlimited liability, the sole proprietorship is liable for all its debts and obligations of the business and must pay them even if it means selling your home, car, or whatever else you own. Partnerships represent approximately 8% of businesses and 13% of overall business revenue or receipts. Each type of partnership has advantages and disadvantages. In general partnerships, resources are pooled and liability is spread among all partners. However, in this type of partnership, there is the possibility for disagreement and/or personality conflicts. A limited partnership is made up of a mixture of general partners and limited partners. Limited partners cannot actively take part in business dealings. The general partner is an owner who has unlimited liability in the company and works with other general partners in the day-to-day management of the business. The limited partner is not able to exercise any management control over the partnership, but maintains limited liability. A limited partner's liability is limited to the amount that he or she invests in the partnership. Let's talk about other forms of partnership. There are two less common forms of partnership outlined in the slide. One is the master limited partnership, and the other is the limited liability partnership. The master limited partnership is unique because it combines the tax benefits of a traditional partnership and the liquidity of a publicly traded security. One example of a master limited partnership is a Sunoco, which formed the MLP called Sunoco Logistics Partnership SXL to acquire, own, and operate a group of crude oil and refined products, pipelines, and storage facilities. The limited liability partnership, in my mind, would be the more desirable of the two just because it limits the risk of the partners from losing personal assets to only their own acts and omissions and the acts and omissions of people under their supervision. Partnerships have distinct advantages. The key advantage is that partnerships have access to more resources such as financial resources, management skills, and knowledge. Partnerships also tend to survive longer and have no special taxes. Successful partnerships start with shared vision. In order to develop a successful partnership, all partners must be honest with each other and bring a variety of different skills to the partnership. Suggestions to discuss with potential partners are on this slide. Partnership agreements must be in writing. Each individual's responsibility to the company must be in writing and include as a part of the contract. Make certain that provisions are in place if one or more partners want to terminate the agreement. Information outlining the terms and conditions of terminating any agreement should be outlined in the original partnership. Like a sole proprietorship, a partnership has some serious disadvantages, such as unlimited liability, division of profits, disagreements among partners, and difficulty of terminating the partnership. Let's review. A general partner is an owner who has unlimited liability and can be active in managing the firm. A limited partner is an owner who invests money in the business but does not have any management responsibility or liability for losses beyond his or her investment. Some of the advantages of partnerships are more financial resources, shared management and pooled complementary skills and knowledge, longer survival, and no special taxes. The disadvantages of a partnership include unlimited liability for general partners, division of profits, disagreements among partners, and difficulty of termination. You don't have to be big to incorporate. Incorporating may be beneficial for small businesses as well. A C Corp, or conventional C corporation, is a state-chartered legal entity with the authority to act and have liabilities separate from its owners or stockholders. In a C Corp, many people can share ownership. The owners are called shareholders. A shareholder is someone that has invested money in the company. This slide gives you a list of different corporate types. There are alien corporations that do businesses in the U.S. but are chartered in another country. Domestic corporations that do business in the states where they're chartered. Foreign corporations that do business in one state but are chartered in another. Closed private corporations have stock that is held by a few people and isn't available to the general public. Open public corporations sell stock to the general public. Quasi-public corporations are chartered by the government as an approved monopoly to perform services to the general public. Examples are public utilities. Professional corporations are owned by those who offer professional services like accountants, doctors, or lawyers. And then there's nonprofits or not-for-profit corporations that don't seek any personal profits. And then finally, multinational corporations that operate in several different countries. The advantage of owning a corporation is limited liability, the ability to raise more money for investment, size, perpetual life, and so on. But the major advantage of that corporate ownership is the limited liability protection, which protects your personal assets. This slide represents how owners affect management. In essence, the owners have that influence on how a business is managed by electing board members that represent their interests. The board then hires top officers and sets the pay for those officers, and then officers select managers that hire employees and so on. There are several disadvantages of a corporation, but the biggest disadvantage is double taxation. A corporation is taxed on income earned, and then shareholders are taxed on any dividends the company may pay. This slide represents Fortune's top 5 U.S. corporations. So they're all names that we more than likely recognize: Walmart, ExxonMobil, Apple, Berkshire Hathaway, and Amazon. Several of the companies from the top 5 deal with similar product services. Think about how products and services of these companies sell are similar. For instance, Exxon, Walmart, and Amazon all sell consumer products. For example, Exxon is more specialized in their products and revolve around automobiles with gas and oil and so on, to where Amazon and Walmart are more similar in the types of businesses that they operate. However, Amazon is a lot larger, to where they have approximately 250 million different types of products compared to Walmart's 4 million types of products. Also, Amazon is primarily offered online, to where Walmart has physical stores, but they also offer products online as well. This slide represents the U.S. top 10 private companies. That's Cargill, Cook Industries, Albertsons, Deloitte's, all the way down to the Pilot, Flying J. Think about the reasons why these companies want to remain private. Some of the reasons could be control, privacy, no external pressures, and preference. I know the company that I work for is a private company and it's been in business for about 25 years. From a revenue standpoint, it wouldn't at all compete with any of these companies. But some of the reasons why is just coming back to that traditional small company ownership, the way it started. And this way, the owner has control over all the decision making, or if we had a bad year, he can decide whether or not to lay off people if we don't have enough revenue to offset expenses. And he can do that without the pressure of board members. This slide represents big companies that make mistakes. Sometimes mistakes can be rectified, but sometimes they contribute to the companies going out of business. A good example of this one is, you may not know of a company called Blockbuster. Blockbuster used to have actual videos that were on cassette tapes. They passed on a partnership with Netflix and ended up going bankrupt in 2011. Another one is Atari. Atari was like a gaming system similar to maybe Xbox, but it was one of the very first gaming systems back in the 80s. The mistake they made is the amount of surplus from a bad game was so big that copies had to be buried in a New Mexican landfill. That's pretty crazy. So just a couple examples of making big mistakes. Any individual can incorporate, and you don't have to have 100 or even 1,000 employees to incorporate. In smaller companies, corporations don't typically issue stock, so there aren't as many advantages or disadvantages of the large corporation. The major advantage here is the limited liability, also known as not making your personal assets at risk or liable for any of the problems or potential lawsuits that might affect the corporation. And then there's also some potential for tax benefits. This is an interesting slide because it identifies companies that have been in business for over 200 years. For instance, J.E. Rhodes and Sons is the oldest company in the U.S. and started off tanning leather for buggy whips. Philadelphia Contributorship Insurance was formed based on suggestions by Benjamin Franklin regarding the establishment of a volunteer fire brigade, which eventually developed into an insurance company. The Bank of New York, New York's first bank, was opened for business in Lower Manhattan on June 9, 1784, only a few months after the departure of the British troops from American soil. The Bank of New York merged with Mellon Financial Corporation of Pittsburgh and was renamed the Bank of New York Mellon in 2007. Environmental changes in the business world will always happen. Those companies that embrace change and provide quality goods and services will continue to profit. An S corporation looks like a corporation, but is taxed like a sole proprietorship or partnership. The primary advantage of an S corp is that it avoids the double taxation of a C corporation. Approximately 3 million U.S. companies operate as an S corporation. A limited liability company, or LLC, is similar to an S corporation but without the special eligibility requirements. The number of LLCs has risen dramatically since 1988 when there were fewer than 100 filings to operate. Today, more than half of new business registrations in some states are LLCs. This slide represents a list of the advantages and disadvantages of LLCs. The biggest advantage of LLC are limited liability and flexibility. The primary disadvantage from entrepreneurs' perspective would be the paperwork. Let's review. Advantages of incorporating a business include limited liability, ability to raise more money for investment, size, perpetual life, ease of ownership change, ease of attracting talented employees, and separation of ownership from management. Disadvantages of incorporating are initial costs, extensive paperwork, double tax, 2 tax returns, size, difficult to terminate, and possible conflict with stockholders and board of directors. Stockholders do not have to be employees of a corporation. There are investors who have limited liability. Stockholders elect the board of directors of a company who select the management to control the company. Stockholders in a corporation have limited liability, meaning as owners, they are responsible for its losses only up to the amount they invested. The corporation could be sued and forced out of business, but the stockholder would only lose what he or she invested. Limited liability companies have become a popular way to form a business since all 50 states now recognize LLCs, or limited liability companies. Some of the advantages of LLCs are limited liability, choice of taxation, which means they can be taxed as a partnership or a corporation, flexible ownership rules, flexible distribution of profit and losses, and operating flexibility. As a company seeks to expand, they generally enter into either a merger with another company or acquiring it. A merger is the result of 2 firms forming one company. An acquisition is when the company purchases the property and obligations of another company. So the company I work for has been in business for 25 years. I've been there for the last 12 years, and since I've been there, we've acquired probably 5 or 6 different companies. Some here locally within the United States, and then also some outside of the United States in Germany, Portugal, Spain, and Latin America. Some of the reasons why, obviously, you acquire another company might be to broaden your services. For us, it was to offer services globally because that's what our clients wanted. However, in addition to being able to offer our services in other countries, we also needed the workers in order to be able to provide this kind of service to our customers. There are 3 types of mergers. Horizontal mergers that take place in the same industry. For example, one competitor merging with another. Vertical mergers take place when companies in a value chain, for example, supplier and distributors merging. A conglomerate merger has no relationship between companies. Both Tyco and General Electric operate as conglomerates. This slide is a great example of types of mergers. The first one is a horizontal merger, which shows the merger of a soft drink company that buys a mineral water company. They're companies within the same industry. Think about Coca-Cola and the fact that they also distribute Dasani water. Then we also have, the next one is a vertical merger. It's different companies in related industries. So you got a soft drink company that buys an artificial sweetener company. And then last is the conglomerate merger. They're 2 unrelated industries, but they're, in this particular example, their items being sold go hand in hand with each other, so it makes sense. So drinking a soft drink and eating a bag of chips would be, kind of one of those hand-in-hand kind of things. But it makes sense for this kind of a merger for an industry to expand. Rather than merge or sell to another company, some corporations decide to maintain, or in some cases, regain control of a firm internally. By taking a firm private, management or a group of stockholders obtains all the firm's stock for themselves by buying back the stock from stockholders. Burger King, Dell, Krispy Kreme, Panera are examples of firms that have taken themselves back to private status. Suppose employees believe they may lose their jobs, or managers believe they could improve the corporation's performance if they own the company. Do they have the right to do this? They sure do. A leveraged buyout, or LBO, is an attempt by employees, management, or a group of private investors to buy out the stockholders in a company, primarily by borrowing the necessary funds. The employees, managers, or investors now become the owners of the firm. LBOs have ranged in size from 50 million to 34 billion and have involved everything from small family businesses to giant corporations like Hertz Company or Toys R Us. Today's business acquisitions are not limited to U.S. buyers. Foreign companies have found the fastest way to grow is often to buy an established operation that can enhance their technology or expand the number of brands they offer. In addition to the three basic forms of business ownership, there are two special forms, franchises and cooperative. First, let's talk about franchises. A franchise agreement is an arrangement whereby someone with a good idea for a business sells the rights to use the business name and sell a product or service to others in a given territory. Some people that are uncomfortable with the idea of starting their own business, this is the perfect way to get started because there's already an idea out there with a great product, proven track record, etc. According to the International Franchise Association, the more than 733,000 franchise businesses operating in the U.S. create more than 7.6 million jobs that produce a direct and indirect economic impact of $674 billion on the U.S. economy. The most popular types of franchises are restaurants, both fast food and full service, gas stations or convenience stores. So a few that you might think of as a franchise is McDonald's. More than likely the McDonald's that you go into is a franchise. There aren't likely to be a company-owned store. Others might be Once Upon a Child, where you can go buy used kids' clothes, or Plato's Closet, or even Starbucks. As with any business, franchises have both advantages and disadvantages. The great advantages of franchises is having assistance with marketing and management. You have personal ownership. The name of your franchise is nationally recognized with not a lot of work from you. You also get advice financially from the company, and there's a lower failure rate because the franchise has support from the franchisor. Disadvantages are large startup costs, shared profit, management regulation, coattail effects, restrictions on selling, and then fraudulent franchisors. One of the problems that is seen in franchises is the lack of diversity, especially among women. Women own about half of all U.S. companies and are opening businesses at double the rate as men. They only represent about 35% of ownership in franchises. Women aren't just franchisees anymore. They are actually becoming franchisors, opening companies like Auntie Anne's, Decorating Den, and Build-A-Bear Workshop. Furthermore, franchisors are becoming more focused in recruiting minorities as franchisees. Minorities own 19% of businesses, but only 30% of franchises. far less than women. Diversity Fran helps draw more diversity owners to the franchisee industry by building awareness. The U.S. Commerce Department, a federal minority business development agency, also provides aspiring minority business owners with training in how to run franchises. Home-based businesses are growing at an enormous rate. This slide will help you clarify the reasons why. The advantages are relief from commuting stress, extra family time, low overhead expenses. Disadvantages are isolation and long hours. When thinking about doing a home-based franchise, think about the business idea, set the goals for the business, decide how many hours you want to work, and determine the number of employees you might need, and then determine how much money you will need to get it started. Many franchises are looking towards home-based businesses. The 10 franchises on the slide are from many different industries and have held their own despite the recent economic crisis. Some of these companies require franchises to rent space for client-based activities. However, the business can run from home as well. The internet has changed franchising in many ways. Most brick-and-mortar franchises have expanded their businesses online and created virtual storefronts to deliver increased value to customers. However, there's many franchisors that prohibit franchisee-sponsored websites because conflicts can erupt and the franchisor creates its own website. Sometimes franchisors send sales or reverse royalties to franchisees who believe their sales were hurt by the franchisor's online sales. But that doesn't always bring about peace. If you're thinking about starting a franchise, be sure to do lots of research in some of the websites that were discussed earlier in the slides. Franchisors often use technology, including social media, to extend their brands and meet the needs of both their customers and their franchises. For example, Candy Bouquet International of Little Rock, Arkansas offers franchises that sell candies in flower-like arrangements. Franchisees have brick-and-mortar locations to serve the walk-in customers, but they are also provided leads from the company's main website. The franchisors keep the franchisees, the brick-and-mortar locations, up to date by sending them emails, and then they use chat rooms to discuss issues or upcoming products. Franchising today is truly a global effort. U.S. franchisors are counting their profits in many different currencies. Because of its proximity and shared language, Canada is the most popular target for US-based franchises. And if you think of going overseas in Europe, England is also, since it's English speaking, another big target. Franchisors are finding it surprisingly easier now to move into China, South Africa, the Philippines, or even the Middle East. What makes franchising successful in global markets is what makes it successful in the U.S. Convenience and a predictable level of service and quality. Franchisors, though, must be careful and do their homework before entering into global franchise agreements. 3 questions should be asked before forming a franchise that's global. Will your intellectual property be protected? Can you give proper support to global partners? Are you able to adapt franchise regulations in other countries? If the answer is yes, then you have a great opportunity with global franchising. As mentioned earlier, not all franchises are created equal and require careful investigation before considering an investment. You can look at different websites to get information on franchising, but a good one if you're interested is www.franchise.com. It can provide information such as cost of thousands of franchise systems. Think about what makes an effective franchisor. Some of the things for me, one of the big things is name recognition, the financial stability, an innovative product, and effective business management. One of those that I consider to be, that should be on this list of 10 high performing are Chick-fil-A. But we also have McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, all the way down to a 7-Eleven. Some people dislike the notion of owners, managers, workers, and buyers being separate individuals with separate goals. So they have formed cooperatives, a different kind of organization to meet their needs for electricity, childcare, housing, etc. A co-op or cooperative is owned and controlled by the people who use it, producers, consumers, or workers with similar needs who pool their resources for mutual gains. In many parts of rural country, for example, government sells wholesale power to electric cooperatives at rates at 40 to 50% below rates non-federal utilities charge. Worldwide, more than 1 billion people are members of cooperatives. Members democratically control these businesses by electing a board of directors that hires professional management. Another kind of cooperative in the United States is formed to give members more economic power as a group than they have as individuals. The best example is a farm cooperative. The goal was for farmers to join together to get better prices for their food and products. Eventually, the idea expanded and farm cooperatives now buy and sell fertilizer, farm equipment, seed, and other products in a multi-billion-dollar industry. Cooperatives have an advantage in the marketplace because they don't have to pay the same kind of taxes corporations pay. Some of the top co-ops are for places like Land O'Lakes, Ocean Spray, Ace Hardware, or even Welch's. Let's review. Before buying a franchise, be sure to check a company's resources and reputation. There are many franchising scams. The checklist in this chapter gives advice about things to consider before buying a franchise. Successful franchising in global markets offers the same opportunities as it does in domestic markets. However, franchisors must be careful to adapt to the region and its cultures where they wish to expand. A cooperative is a form of business that is owned and controlled by the people who use it, producers, consumers, or workers with similar needs who pool their resources for mutual gain. Cooperatives are a major force in agriculture and other industries today.